Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Rich Allen and Jeremy Smith. The Avengers have burst back onto our screens this week, but the real blockbusters have been in French football. So who has been a box office smash and who didn't even make the final cut? All of that and more after our latest headlines. Saint-Etienne continued both their superb second half of the season and their grip on a Europa League place by beating fellow European chasers Montpellier on Friday night. Romain Hamouma's early strike helped maintain Les Verts' unbeaten run that now dates back to the 21st of January. Lyon notched their sixth win in a row to rise into second after they put Nantes away with a 2-0 win. Memphis Depay and Bertrand Traoré scored for Les Gones on Saturday, who are now frontrunners for that automatic Champions League place. That happened because in the multiplex on Saturday, Monaco were held to a 0-0 draw at home to Amiens, with both sides finishing with 10 men as Adama Diakabe and Prince Desir Guna both seeing red in added time. Elsewhere, Lille took a huge step forward with a 3-1 win over lowly Metz, who are now 6 points from safety with just 3 games remaining, while Troyes also gave their survival hopes a boost as they came from behind to win 3-1 against Caen. In the other games on Saturday, Strasbourg missed out on moving further away from the drop zone with a 1-1 draw against Nice, as Bordeaux won their mid-table clash with Dijon 3-1. On Sunday, Rennes came from a goal behind to beat Toulouse 2-1 at home, those 3 points keeping them well in the hunt for European football, while Les Violets are now looking over their shoulders 2 points above that dotted line, with Lille coming to the Municipal next weekend. Marseille failed to take advantage of Monaco's slip-up as they drew 1-1 with Angers, with one eye firmly on Thursday's second leg against Salzburg in the Europa League, while PSG had Edinson Cavani to thank as they came from behind to draw 2-2 with a superb Guingamp side in the same week that Unai Emery announced his summer departure from the club. In Ligue 2, we will welcome Stade de Reims next season back to Ligue 1 as champions of the second division, 2 years after their relegation, while Nîmes will be at least a playoff semi-finalist after as they now hold an 8-point gap with 2 games to go. And that's all for now, but for all the latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with that Europa League victory, as we had no Thursday showing it, but Marseille definitely need to be highlighted there because they pulled off a superb result in a rocking velodrome on Thursday night against Red Bull Salzburg. A 2-0 win gives them a huge boost ahead of the next game in Australia later this week, Rich. But that scoreline for starters, and against the side that have pulled up some real trees in the Europa League, of the longest standing team so far in the entirety of Europe, having played one of the first qualifying rounds. But what a great result to get at home in Europe, not giving an away goal and giving them a real chance of qualifying for the final.
Absolutely. I think on paper, it's an excellent result. I think you look at the performance, you look at what they've had to go through. They've lost. At unfortunate time, they're losing and have lost a couple of key players. So to take a 2-0 win into the second leg of a semi-final in any cup competition, I think can be looked at with a feeling of we're probably over halfway there. I think if you looked at the performance though in a little bit more detail, I think perhaps the more ardent Marseille fan might think, through they dominated the majority of the match, certainly in the early stages, and then in large parts of the second half. Maybe if they're being really picky and knowing what Salzburg can do at home, as certainly Lazio can attest from the previous round, maybe another goal wouldn't have been pretty handy, and it's an obvious thing to say. But as I say, we know what Salzburg can do. They will have they've turned around certainly a bigger deficit than this, in the previous round. So it's certainly, they're going to see it as a doable comeback. I think the key thing for Marseille is that Salzburg didn't score, although they came very close to. I think they hit the woodwork and had one or two opportunities where I think Marseille were perhaps a little fortunate. But all in all, as I say, 2-0, you can't really complain. All in all, it was a good performance, and they can go to the second leg, I think, with confidence that they are, tentatively anyway, 1 foot in that final.
Yeah, it was a real blood and thunder velodrome packed to the rafters on Thursday night. One of those moments that you see sometimes in French football where you get the hair standing on end when a stadium's really rocking and getting behind their team. But Salzburg put in quite a fight, like you mentioned, Rich. They had the post. They had possibly a really good shout for a penalty dismissed by the referee. Obviously, Marseille for the first 30 minutes, I thought were the better side and grabbed a deserved goal. And it was Rudy Garcia again who's had it. I want to come on to in a moment, but brought on NG with about 60 minutes on for a midfielder as well in Lopez, and he's the one who grabs the second and important goal, because now an away goal in Austria really puts the opponents up against it. And Jez, we've talked about Marseille a number of times this season, really, and how good they have been in certain scenarios. They felt maybe a little bit lucky, but I think the one constant and the one thing we can say for certainty behind this success for Marseille this season and their improvement is that man Rudy Garcia, who's made the right calls at the right times and showed it in that Europa League game that changing things just at the right time has given them an extra edge when they needed it.
Yeah, I think he's he's a class act as a manager. He's proved it in the past in France. Although it didn't finish brilliantly, I think he did a very good job at Roma as well, which I think only sort of enhanced his reputation. And yeah, I think he's an excellent manager. I've sort of seen debates this year where you can probably argue the toss either way. That the fact that they're beating everyone below the top three proves what a good manager he is, because he's sort of getting the best out of the players, and it's not easy to have that consistently good record. Other people have said, well, a really good manager would be able to eat those results out against the very top players. But considering this is the start of the Marseille project, it's not the greatest ever squad that he's got to work with. He's doing a fantastic job. He's got, Thauvin having the season of his life. He's doing it without, a really top class centre forward as well. So, he deserves all the credit. And as you said, Marseille did ride their luck at times on Thursday, but it was one of those managerial masterstrokes that he brings Ng on. It wasn't the obvious substitution necessarily to make, and he's the one that put the match to bed and possibly the tie as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like we say, Salzburg have been terrific. They have leaked goals as much as they've scored them, and nicking one away from home, while they showed against Lazio that they're not afraid to push forward, that really another goal should possibly really push them over the line. But Rich, there is still worries ahead of that Europa League game, or the big one, and it seems strange saying it now, but you wouldn't have said this a couple of months ago, but Kostas Mitroglou it will likely be unavailable, having picked up something during the weekend as well. Them finally having a focal point, we were mentioning a couple of weeks ago, felt like, especially with his form, gave them an extra edge, but losing that and possibly having to have Saint-Germain, and that's usually, on paper at least, not a bad replacement, but at the same time the Greek international has been a force and would be a big miss in that one.
Absolutely. It almost wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't even go with Germain. I think Germain would give you certainly maintain that sort of more focal point up front, but he may even chuck Ng there and think, well, let's have a bit more mobility, let's have a bit more pace, because Marseille, I don't think, should be going to Salzburg with the game plan of protecting that. Go there to grind out a 0-0 draw, for example. I don't think that's the game plan Marseille should go for. I don't think it's it's in their style. I don't think certainly the defence is strong enough to sort of withstand that pressure and maintain that level of discipline for 90 minutes. So I think it wouldn't surprise me if Ng is called upon from the start as a sort of lone striker to provide that movement. He can then have Tovan and Campos either side of him with Payet just behind. But I think just touching back on giving Rudy Garcia just praise, I think the way he's managed Mitroglou, although he's as you say, it seems weird that we're saying that he's going to be a miss considering what a torrid start to his Marseille career, certainly the first few months. But I think the way he's managed Mitroglou in finally realizing that perhaps he's not, he's not in great form, benching him, introducing him from the bench, eventually building up the confidence that he comes off the bench and was proven to be a real impact off the bench. And then eventually, obviously, the confidence returns and he brings him in from the start and the scoring spree continues. And it's the Mitroglou that I think they hoped they'd signed at the start of the transfer window back in January. So I think that's another area that we can really give Garcia praise in the way that he's managed that situation to rescue a player who was really struggling for confidence and bring him back up to the top level. But I just have concerns about how they do go about this game. I fear they will go after the 0-0 draw, and I fear they will go out and try and defend this lead. And I just feel that certainly in that opening half hour, it's a dangerous game to, because once you've gone out with that attitude, it's very difficult, I think, mid-game to change it. I think if you can go out positive, thinking let's nick an early goal, I'd probably, touch wood, would put the tie to bed. That's the attitude to go with. That's how, Marseille have certainly played when Marseille have been at their best. That's the attitude that they've taken into games, to go after them. They've got attacking players throughout who are in form, who are playing really well. Utilise that. Don't just sit back on that defence, which, okay, has held up so far. I think for certainly the last few weeks has held up relatively well, but it's still not a particularly strong defence. You've not got your first choice goalkeeper. Luis Gustavo may be deployed in centre back, and no matter how fantastic a season he's had, he is ultimately not a centre back. And there will be moments where he will be caught out. And so defending a lead for 90 minutes, I don't think with that defence that they've got is the attitude they should be taking.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Rich. This team is built for blood and thunder, like I say, with the same as the stadium. Really, I don't think you can try and go and defend against a team that, with a weight of history behind them. The first Austrian team in a long, long while to reach a European final will be really momentous for them. So I can't imagine that you want to risk trying to hold it back. But we've got that to look forward to on Thursday. But moving on to their league form, at least anyway, in part at least, because there is that battle for second now, Jez, that Monaco have allowed really others to go for. And while Marseille didn't take advantage of Monaco's 0-0 draw against Amiens, with a 1-1 draw against Angers, someone who did is Lyon, who move into second place in that automatic Champions League place. And there's some weird permutations coming up possibly if Marseille do reach the Europa League final. But focusing on Lyon for a moment, it was another good win against an outside that have really plundered over the last sort of couple of months or so. But at the same time, 6 wins on the trot. I mean, we were mentioning at the first half of 2018 that Lyon were falling off a cliff, and now they are really rising to the occasion. And we've mentioned behind Memphis Depay already, but with everyone back fit and on fire and all cylinders, they have to be favourites for that spot now, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, looking at the 3 matches that each team have got left, I mean, there is potential for all teams to drop points. And Lyon, Marseille, for example, have both got Nice, who, like Lyon, Marseille, it just depends which Nice turns up on the day. But you've got to put Lyon's favourites, the run of form they're in, the fact that they've now got second to defend, the goal difference they've got. And yeah, as you said, sort of everyone's back on form at the same time. There seems to be Unless they're just hiding it well, there seems to be a lot more sort of peace and harmony within the squad than there was earlier in the season. Fekir has just come back from injury and is looking really sharp the last couple of matches. And yeah, I mean we've spoken a lot about how it was just bizarre how they'd just beaten PSG. You thought, right, this is set up for them to really go on a good run now, and instead they had a terrible period. But since they've beaten Marseille, I think it's maybe 7 league wins in a row, and as you said earlier, six wins in a row in all competitions. And Depay has been outstanding during that period, and playing in a couple of different positions as well, and sort of forcing Genesio into a change of formation so that he can accommodate Depay up front and still bring Fekir back in as well. They really are sort of sport for choice in terms of personnel and players. Bertrand Traore, who took a while to settle, is playing well now. And Diaz, who's had a fantastic season, is at the moment struggling to get that much game time just because so many of the other players are on form. And the LFP released a sort of widget today where you can make up your own Liga team of the season, and all the ones that I was seeing other people post, although they didn't all have necessarily the same players, everyone seemed to have either Aouar or Ndombele in the midfield, and for 2 kids basically in their first season at the very highest level to be getting that much recognition, even if it's just from sort of Twitter pundits, not necessarily experts, just says so much about how well they've been playing as well. So all things considered, Lyon are the favourites, but there definitely could still be a couple of twists and turns. Knowing the 3 teams involved, the teams that they're playing, I don't think it's necessarily going to be straightforward 9 points out of 9 for all 3 of them.
No, absolutely not. And there's bound to be twists and turns coming up, and there's possibly even in the summer. I mean, there's rumours that another Lyon player, Goebbels, is partially on his way to Monaco, but they're hardballing them and coming on to Monaco really, and talking about players possibly coming in, Rich, but players possibly going out really, because a lot of their heads seem to be turned. There's rumours there's a bit of disrest in the squad as well, with João Moutinho signing a new deal and others waiting on contract extensions. They've been held off to the summer. That has displeased a few of them. But at the same time, that discontent, that sort of waiting for the summer, some maybe holding back for World Cup campaign, some maybe thinking I don't want to get injured ahead of the summer for a possible move away. It's all led to this dysfunction that's slowly eaten away at their leader, and now they're in danger not only of finishing 3rd, but if it continues like this, they might be out of the Champions League places altogether.
Yeah, it's curious. I mean, one thing I think throughout this, certainly the last 2 or 3 seasons with Monaco, one thing I could never accuse them of is sort of a poor mentality of players allowing themselves to be distracted and giving the impression that they don't really care about the club anymore and are just interested in the season finishing and getting a move away. And it's quite sad, I think, to see Monaco sort of having their season just coming to a sort of really miserable end. You sort of look at their recent fixtures and okay, losing the Coupe de France, the Coupe de la Ligue final, against Paris Saint-Germain was to be expected, I suppose. But performances since then, arguably performances even just before then, they've hardly been the Monaco that we know. They sort of laboured to a draw at Rennes. They laboured to a win at home to Nantes. They then had that 7-1 thrashing against PSG. They then were a victim of another thrashing in a way. Were losing 3-1 at Guingamp, and then it was just a very weak performance. Players just didn't seem interested. They were booed off the pitch. It's just the discontent was clear. And it just leads you to think that there's going to be big changes. And there's almost going to have to be big changes, because you can't take that kind of attitude and the players that have displayed that kind of attitude into the new season. And it's just disappointing, I think. I mean, it's made for a fantastic end to the season for the neutral, because we've now got this three-way battle for who's going to finish second. But this shouldn't have been the case. Monaco, a month ago, maybe a little bit more, they had second place sewn up and they were cruising. And maybe that was a thing. Maybe the players then just took their eye off the ball and just thought, well, we've got second place. Lyon and Marseille can't seem to string, 2 consecutive wins together or 2 consecutive strong performances. We've got this in the bag. And lo and behold, we're at a point now where, their next game is away at Caen. I can't sit here and say, oh yeah, Monaco are going to win that game. And then that's not the Monaco that we've come to expect. That should be a walk in the park for Monaco, but it isn't going to be. It's going to be really tough. And as strange as it sounds, you wouldn't be too surprised if Caen nicked something from that game. Now, the sort of senior management and, all the way up to the very top with the guys in charge, they're going to have to recognise that. They're going to have to recognise that what's gone wrong this season. Is it that players who were perhaps promised moves last summer or in the winter have sort of thrown their toys out of the pram? Because it certainly seems to be the case with Lamar. And I don't like criticising Thomas Lamar because I think he's a really good player, but his attitude, and I'd mentioned it a few weeks ago that I was worried that there was I'd noticed a slight change in, I think it might have been the Coupe de la Ligue final. It's just free fall downhill, and he's an absolute ghost of the player that he was. And it's not painting him in a good light. It's painting him in the light of, well, here's just another one of these players who, it's player power and no loyalty to the club. He's not been as good as he has been the last few years. By no means he's been anywhere near that level. And it's just a shame, because deep down I'm still of a belief that that's not the Thomas Lemar. He's not that kind of player, but I find it increasingly difficult to defend him when we see performances as we saw at the weekend, because it was just symptomatic of how Monaco have been for the last few weeks. And it's a shame, because you don't like to see this project coming to an end. But this and I think Jeremy's touched upon it in an article he put up today, this era of Monaco has drawn to an end, and someone's going to have to come in, be it new players, be it new management, and freshen things up. Because at the minute it's reached a little bit of almost a point of stagnation. So changes are going to have to be made. It's going to be an interesting summer, but if they don't have that 4th place, that's going to have a big impact on the kind of players I think they can bring in.
Yeah, it's a real little bit of a worry to end the season. We mentioned a few weeks ago that they had a stellar second half of the season, and that seemingly how Leonardo Jardim teams tend to go. But at the same time, it feels like they're on the beach. Maybe he's hoping that there might be possibly a summer move even for him to maybe allow this not to tarnish his reputation, especially for next season. Doesn't seem as positive as it has, because you're looking at players like Adama Diakabe, who got sent off. He's still a young player, obviously, but it was maybe a little bit early anyway. But he's maybe not had the impact of someone like Thomas Lemar had when he first joined the club. I don't really want to be blaming too many players, but that next generation, at least anyway, at the moment, doesn't look like it can step up to the plate. But there is some. I just wanted to quickly mention before we move on that interesting permutation would be if Marseille do make the Europa League final, they essentially would make third. If they, for example, finished 4th, if they obviously win, they're in the Champions League automatically, which would be great for teams in Ligue 1. But if they lost, they would be handing possibly Lyon or possibly Monaco a automatic Champions League place, because of how the Europa League rules work, with Atletico already having qualified through their league position. But on to the other big news in this week in French football. I say big, but it's probably the worst kept secret in French football, and that's Unai Emery will no longer be Paris Saint-Germain manager after this season. It's been expected, and frankly, it feels a little bit like maybe they've given him the dignity to say he's leaving rather than being sacked, which is at least a little bit of a positive on a PR stance. But at the same time, Jez, I want to think back, looking back at his career in Ligue 1 in his 2 seasons, obviously winning a league title, won 3 domestic competitions in the final of a 4th as well, that obviously will come at the end of this season. But the 2 Champions League exits, one after a fantastic result against Barcelona, then it gets turned around and one of the most embarrassing ones really for him, and then didn't really compete against Paris Saint-Germain in the way they would have expected to, but also with Neymar out in the second leg, that didn't help either. Can his reign be called a success?
No, I don't think so. Overall, no. Domestically, I didn't realise until sort of rewatching highlights tonight that Guingamp's draw this weekend, that's the first points that anyone has taken from PSG at home this season. So had they gone the whole season winning every single match at home, should they break the record for the most points won in a season? I still feel that overall you have to say no. Another treble, great, but Blanc won 2 of them. It doesn't feel such a special achievement anymore. And it might be unfair to say so, but they're so dominant domestically that he can't really be judged by that. And even then, there's 2 seasons. 1 year he lost the title, and this PSG team, with the resources they have, they should be walking the title year in, year out. So, even the fact that he didn't win the title both years in charge, I think goes to his discredit. And then, unfortunately, as we said so many times before, PSG are now playing or looking at the level where they have to be judged on the Champions League. And to some extent, I do think he's been unlucky. That, as you said, it was a brilliant performance in the first leg against Barcelona, and the second leg, they can look at a few dodgy refereeing decisions that went against them. But the fact is that they should never have even put themselves in that position where they were vulnerable to those, to the whims of the referee. And I do think that he should take the blame for some of that. And then this season, it all looks so good at the start, absolutely smashing Bayern Munich. But then even as the group stage went on, there was a little bit of taking the foot off the pedal, I think. And then they were very unlucky to get Real Madrid in the next round. And again, until the last 10 minutes of the first leg, all looked very good. But then there was no reaction. There wasn't a good enough reaction after that. And Emery has to take some of the blame for that. Certainly not all of it. We've just discussed before that the players are responsible, that El Khelafi, I think more than anyone else, is responsible for basically giving the players too much power, and also, I guess, hamstringing Emery in that he wasn't, he didn't strengthen in the positions that clearly needed to be strengthened. So, lots of mitigating circumstances, but overall, I think you have to say that despite 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 probably titles or trophy wins in 2 seasons, I'd say no, not a success.
Which always sounds a little bit strange, doesn't it, when you think that a league title and 3 domestic cups anywhere else would, in larger leagues at least anyway, would be seen as a great success. But Rich, he's measured against not just the money but peers as well. And you think that Laurent Blanc obviously won just as many trophies, or really more, because they didn't lose the league title during his reign, but they did have that funny season with Monaco being excellent, and they had some good moments. Really, it felt maybe like that initial Barcelona result gave him a massive boost, but at the same time, the second result really condemned him in the end, and it almost felt like, I feel a bit sorry for saying this, but almost like a pity year, this one. Essentially, they bought a load of players and it allowed him to stay on to sort of almost prove their own point of that he wasn't the man to lead them on. And at the same time, while that's a little bit unfair, at the same time, this was the stage for him to prove that he was worthy of this big step up, having done so well with Sevilla, and obviously it's not turned out to be that way.
Yeah, I think you can't knock the guy. I mean, he saw, he was offered this opportunity to take an incredibly ambitious, free spending club to the next level. You know, he'd won 3 consecutive Europa Leagues. Why not? In theory, it made sense for him to do that. Sadly, it just didn't pan out. That second leg against Barcelona, as you say, that probably tainted him. And then to combine that with not winning the league in his first season, I think meant he was probably condemned from the start of this season. And they, as you say, it was a bit of a pity decision of, well, we can't fire the guy after only one season. You know, we've made a point of bringing in these big name players. We've made a point of hiring this guy on a multi-year contract. We made a point of saying, look, this is a guy that's a step up from Laurent Blanc. And it didn't happen in the first year. They were knocked out in an earlier round of the Champions League, didn't win the league and title. And so I think the decision was made. I think, to be honest, he could have won the league and title in February, the semi-finals of the Champions League. I still don't think they'd have kept him on at the end of this season. I think the writing was on the wall for what happened last season. And then to again go out at that earlier stage in the Champions League hasn't helped. I don't think the football PSG have played has been as scintillating as it could have been with the talent at their disposal. And I absolutely do not put that element of blame on Emery. That very much is a finger point at El Khelaïfi and his transfer policy and his desire to create, as I keep calling them, the Galacticos Mark II. That's just, it's not going to work. It really isn't going to work. You need to build a team. But we've had that discussion, I'm sure, numerous times before. But I think what you've seen, I think, in the last week probably sums up Emery's time in charge of PSG, because we've seen in the 7-1 win over Monaco, probably the best football PSG have played in the QSI era. I think that half an hour against Monaco was the best football I think I have seen PSG play since the Qataris came in. I struggle to get someone to find me a better half an hour of football than that, which is great, but it was only half an hour in one game. In that same month, we've probably seen arguably PSG's 2 worst performances in the Qatari era. Away at Saint-Etienne, where they got the most fortunate of equalisers with that 95th minute Debuchy own goal. And apart from a 10-minute spell at the end where they pulled the 2 goals back, they were absolutely abysmal, I thought, against Guingamp last night as well. And obviously that's poor performance over more games than we've seen the amazing football, which I think has probably summed up that Emery era. He has at times been able to get PSG playing some brilliant stuff. Sadly, it's nowhere near consistent enough. It's nowhere near long enough that I, certainly as a neutral watching PSG, would expect them to do. And sadly, we've still had too much of the sort of dross football where players don't seem interested, that the attitude is that Ligue 1 is this walk in the park, this easy, we're gonna win it no matter what we do. We just need to turn up for, a few minutes each game. Again, I don't know how much of that blame I put on Emery. It's such a difficult job. The conditions that he's got, the players that he's got, El Khelaïfi breathing down his neck and interfering so frequently. It's a very, very difficult job, and I'm sure we'll come on to who could potentially do that job. But all in all, it's not been a success for Emery. I hope it doesn't tarnish his managerial career because, as I say, I defy the majority of managers in world football to come in and do a much better job in those circumstances, because I really don't think there'd be many.
I think that's the thing that it's certainly for example, the Guingamp match. You can, PSG players, they're not the first to the end of the season with nothing to play for, whether it's because you're mid-table or you've already won the league, whatever. It's not the first time a team is sort of mentally already on holiday. But the problem is that this has happened several times before throughout this season, throughout other seasons, and it's not obvious. who to blame. I think possibly a few of the players that PSG have just got that kind of personality, that they're the type that do that kind of thing, and I think possibly it's the same kind of personality that leads to the fact that they can't switch it on enough, or they don't have the sort of, they're winning, but you get the impression that some of them aren't born winners. They're not the type that would do whatever it takes to win things, and that's why you imagine, I don't know, I don't like to compliment him, but Cristiano Ronaldo, he's always going to be switched on, even if there's nothing to play for, because he's going to be wanting to break record after record, even if it's for purely selfish reasons. And therefore, when it comes to the really important matches, he's going to be even more switched on and used to being switched on and be at the top of his game for those matches. I think a lot of these PSG players are the type that, because they pick and choose their matches, they're not able to turn it on when they really need to. I think it's partly the players' personalities. I think it's partly the way that they're treated by Al Khalifi, so they sort of believe the hype that he gives them. And you have to kind of blame Emery or whoever the manager is for not having the strength to turn that around in them. But I think it is a losing battle. I think he's got people behind him who are undermining him, and he's clearly, I think he has very little say in the personnel that he brings into the club, but probably even that he puts onto the pitch. So I blame him a little, but I do feel very sorry for him.
Yeah, it's a funny balancing act, isn't it? I mean, the Paris Saint-Germain job feels like a bit of a poison chalice, because you sort of are hiding to nothing. You have to win everything domestically, and then you have to get pretty close to the Champions League, as in at least a semi really was expected this season for Unai Emery to really save his job, and that baton will be passed to someone else in the summer, whether that will be Thomas Tuchel as the bookies' favourite really at the moment, or someone else. We should wait and see, but that will be an interesting one to follow, see who does get it and if they can do something to keep on holding it for longer than a couple of years at least. But let's look at those that might be losing their Liga status this season. And the relegation battle took another turn this week as Lille beat Metz, Troyes beat Caen, and Toulouse let it slip against Caen. But we'll start with Metz, Jez. Obviously, I want to come to you first on this one. They're now 6 points adrift with 3 games remaining. It's been a real great fight back, really, in the second half of the season, when we thought, even though they won the last 2 games of the first half of the season, it still felt like they were a million miles away from safety. But to even have stood a chance with 3 games to go is quite a result. And while it'll take a real monumentous effort to stay up now, it's been at least they've given it a good go. Is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few times this season where it looked like we were never going to get as close as sort of, well, we're not officially relegated yet. It will go to the last week or two, which is, at times that's been unthinkable. After the Lille match, Frederick Hans said, every crunch match, every crucial game that we've had, we've lost. And the amazing thing is that they've had that many crunch matches, and that they're, as I said, that they're still sort of fighting and still got a chance. And I don't know if it's to their credit or to the discredit of other teams that they haven't all managed to pull away from Metz. The frustrating thing is that, again, the goal they scored against Lille was, again, Dossé to Roux. Roux is now, again, ahead of Mbappe in the scoring charts. Dossé to Roux, the combination is the joint best alongside Neymar to Cavani in terms of assists to goal scorer. I think he's got 11 or 12 assists now, and Roux's got 14 or 15 goals. I forget, but for a team that's been rock bottom for the whole season, those are really impressive stats. And it also makes it pretty obvious, although goal scoring was a problem at the start of the season, it's obvious that the real problem for Metz has been further back. And Andrew Gibney, who's I think was at the match and is a Lille fan, he said that for the most part Metz played the better football, but you give other teams easy chances. Teams like Lille, who've really been struggling to score and to win, you give them a chance to build up some confidence and a head of steam. They're already 1-0 down. I think the killer goal was the one in injury time of the first half, which was a real sort of sucker punch. But even then, Metz sort of came back. They pulled the goal back. Maignan pulled off a great save to keep it at 2-1, and then again, poor defending lets Lille in for the third goal. So with the defensive performances or non-performances last year as well, but this year I think in particular, that they unfortunately they can't expect to stay up. Amongst Metz fans, there's a lot of bitterness about the summer transfer policy. Didn't think it was very good at all. Didn't invest well enough the money received from the sale of Ismail Assar. No one really understood why we didn't go after Diabate properly again, after the amazing effect that he had in the second half of last season. So there is quite a bit of bitterness amongst the fans, and at this stage it's difficult to see how they're able to pick themselves up next season. We're all assuming that Dossevy and Roux won't be there, that Niakate, who's been the only positive of any kind in the defence, that he probably won't be there. Kawashima said he's happy to stay, but no one's made any commitment one way or the other yet. So it's a bit like Monaco in that Metz do seem to be having quite a big squad overhaul every summer, but obviously not quite at the level of Monaco, which is without the money to spend or to invest in youth, which makes it slightly more difficult. So they've slipped down regularly the last few seasons, and they have managed to yo-yo back up. So we live in hope that they'll do it again. But I think most fans are slightly more pessimistic this time than the last time they went down, for example. And League at the moment, I think, is a little bit like the Championship in England. I think it's actually a much better, more compelling, more competitive division overall than the top flight. So I think it's getting ever harder to get out of it. So I'm not expecting an immediate return to Ligue 1 this time, unfortunately.
Yeah, League 2 is such a tough division to get out of, although obviously that expanded playoff does help some teams, but it's that sort of weird Scottish style one where there's a quarter-final and a semi-final. It makes it have so harder to get back into Liga than it was before. But with that defeat comes a great win really for Lille, and a much needed one, Rich, just as they looked like that they were slipping, and that maybe a win for the other side would have possibly pretty much relegated them, but they live to fight another day and have a real chance now. If you look at the table, I mean, with the other results going, well, at least in terms of safety going their way, with the Toulouse defeat and the Strasbourg only picking up a point. They're only 3 behind them. They're 2 behind Toulouse. There's a real battle on that for that spot now, and with Lille facing Toulouse, which will be the absolute game to watch on Sunday for absolute certain. You need to tune into that one, because that's going to be a firecracker, isn't it?
It absolutely will be. I mean, it's such an important win, because as odd as it sounds, considering that's only that win was only their 3rd league win since the turn of the year. I don't think in the last few games, maybe the Marseille game aside, but I think Lille themselves wrote that one off with their focus being solely on this game, which obviously has paid dividends. I don't think the last few weeks they've been playing too badly. I mean, they were incredibly unfortunate in that home game against Guingamp, where they conceded 2 injury time goals after being in a two goal winning position. They haven't been playing too badly, so I think now to actually have played, still played reasonably well, but perhaps not even been the best team on the pitch, but take away the 3 points is a massive confidence boost. We've talked about it with Metz when they won at Rennes. It gives the team that taste of victory What does it feel like to win a game, and that sort of rush of emotion that brings, and the positive vibes throughout the squad, and what they need to do, which Metz didn't quite do, which is has resulted them in the position that they're now in, is take that into the next game. Remember how that feels, and it's probably helps Lille. I think that it's another absolutely massive game against a rival who, if they can win that game, it gets them out of the automatic drop zone and brings another team further into the mire with them. And so it's an absolutely massive game. You feel confident to say the winner of that, if there is a winner, is probably safe. The loser of that game, if there's a loser, is probably down. It's that much. That much is hinging on it. You feel. Lille will be looking at that, thinking, well, we can't lose focus of that game. But beyond that, the game after is at home to Dijon. Dijon have nothing to play for. That's a potentially winnable game. But they're then away at Saint-Etienne on the last game of the season, with potentially Saint-Etienne needing the points for a Europa League spot. So it puts probably even more importance on getting something from that Toulouse game, even if it's just avoiding defeat, even a point. But I think they also then have to be wary that Toulouse have a fairly-ish straightforward running after Lille at home. They're at Bordeaux away. Again, Bordeaux don't really have anything to play for. Guingamp at home. Again, Guingamp don't really have anything to play for. So you can see them, the battling qualities of Toulouse. You could see them nicking a point at Bordeaux. You could see them even nicking a win at home to Guingamp. They were relatively unlucky against Rennes at the weekend. I thought Toulouse were. They went ahead, slightly fortuitous goal. But again, it was not a classic Rennes performance. It was, well, in a way, it was a classic Rennes performance. In so much as it was a struggle. It was not pretty. It was, another win by, an ugly performance. But it's going to be such a huge game, this, because, as I say, so much riding on it. It's beyond a 6-pointer now. It's a stay in Ligue 1, relegated to Ligue 2 match. It's almost a playoff in itself.
Yeah, that was the funny thing about that Rennes Toulouse game. I mean, even Alban Lafont almost grabbed an equaliser, which would have been really spectacular and really would have summed up this relegation battle we've been having. But that game has more significance for both sides, because both now need a win because of the result that Troyes got just against Caen. It obviously come from behind, and they've been hinting at a performance like this over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, they had a couple of recent games against tough sides in Saint-Etienne and Marseille, but they were ahead twice against Marseille, but eventually pegged back in the end. They were ahead again against Les Verts, but they came back to win 2-1, and they finally got one over the line. Maybe, but at the same time, with the games that are coming up, they've got Lyon next weekend, who are on a fantastic run themselves, chasing for that second spot. They've then got a game against Montpellier, who might be out of the European fight now, and then a game against Monaco, who maybe are on the beach at the same time. So there is still opportunity, but Troyes at the same time have proven that they're not afraid of these bigger teams at the moment, aren't afraid to try and attack them and try and make things happen. But at the same time, at least they've given themselves a glimmer of hope in what looked like a season slipping away.
That's the thing. I think we've all been writing off Troyes for a while just because they were on such a bad run and had such a difficult run in. But this was always the match that they absolutely had to win just to give them a fighting chance. And to an extent, it was a good time to play Caen, because Caen just caught up on their postponed match. So as you said, two very difficult matches that would have taken a lot out of them physically and emotionally against Marseille and Saint-Etienne, but then Caen had that extra match in midweek, so it was a good time to sort of take advantage of Caen perhaps being a little more tired. And Troyes showed great character. Caen went ahead, I think, in the first or second minute, something like that. Troyes immediately reacted, helped by some dodgy goalkeeping by Vercout, but you have to make your own luck, and the goal came from a deep free kick that was swung in a couple of minutes before that. They almost scored actually with an almost identical situation, so it wasn't entirely luck on their part. Nive, 41-year-old, still working magic with the goal to put them ahead. So it's still going to be tough for them, but they've just given themselves, I guess, a lifeline, or similarly to what you said about Lille taking something into the next match. That's what Troyes should be able to do. They should be able to take a lot of confidence, even from those two defeats against Marseille and Saint-Etienne, but certainly from this win. And while again, the form that Lyon are in at the moment, you wouldn't expect Troyes to get anything from that. As we said before, you never entirely know with Lyon. If a team really gets stuck in and sort of gives them a bit of a fright early on, can see possibly heads going down, that kind of thing. So I still wouldn't necessarily be putting any money on Troyes to stay up, but it helps again that Lille and Toulouse are playing each other, so they're not both going to get points. So they're not both going to sort of run away. So I think Troyes will be sort of in touch for the rest of the season, and there's the sort of second chance of the playoffs. So all they need to do is try to better whatever Lille do in the run-in, and then then sort of take their chances against whoever's left in the playoffs in Ligue 2, which isn't going to be a formality at all. But the fact that they're fighting, I thought they could well be dead and buried by now. And I think it was a really characterful performance to come back from that early goal down and play some nice football as well. It wasn't just really ugly, dirgy 6 point relegation battle where everyone was scared to make mistakes and the goal just came from a mistake or one piece of genius. That it was the second and third Troyes goals were classy goals, nice moves, good finishes, and they deserve the chance that they've given themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, and fair play to them if we kept on writing them off, really. But at the same time, a couple more teams have been, well, at least one more team, you might say, maybe have just got enough to stay out of it. But Strasbourg got a draw against Nice. They were ahead in that game as well, Rich, but were pegged back in the end. And I've had a couple of results like that recently. They've got Rennes this upcoming weekend, who might give them a helping hand. I'm not sure. Your team, Rich, might still be facing for European football, but they've also got a game against an informed Lyon side the weekend after, and then maybe their saving grace really is that game against Nantes, who are in absolute free fall at the moment. But at the same time, they have to be looking over their shoulders at the moment, especially with that game between Toulouse and Lille at the weekend. That a victory for either of those sides puts Strasbourg, especially if they lose that game against Rennes, right back into the mix and worrying about their own safety.
Yeah, I mean, they're just in absolutely torrid form at the minute. I mean, I think it's only 2 league wins since we came back from the winter break, which is just, Lille have won more than that, and look at the mess that Lille are in. It's not going well, and it certainly, if I was a Strasbourg fan, I'd be feeling quite nervous right now, especially with those wins for Troyes and Lille at the weekend, because all of a sudden with Lille and Toulouse winning, a winner in that game, looking at the goal difference for the respective clubs, a win for either team, either Lille or Toulouse, puts them above Strasbourg. Almost it's they're going to be, more than any other team, are going to be praying for a draw there, because it's not a particularly nice run in for Strasbourg. Even though we've said that Nantes themselves are in free fall, it's not like Strasbourg are playing well themselves. So even coming up against a team that's in free fall is still no gimme. Yeah, I mean, if I'm a Strasbourg fan, I'm feeling very, very nervous at the moment because it's not going to be a particularly fun May, I don't think, for them. I think there might just be enough in the tank for them to stay up, but it's going to be very close, and they really cannot afford to drop their efforts in even 1%.
No, it's going to go right down to the wire. It feels like for a lot of these teams are heading into the back end of the season with so many games, especially like we say, we cannot emphasize enough how big that game is in Toulouse next weekend. That's going to really shape for a lot of teams, not just themselves, but a lot of other teams around them. What might happen in the near future. On to our final section this weekend, and a plane to Russia one that I thought would be a really interesting one to visit because you never know how football changes over a month and a half. And a month and a half ago, we talked about one man in Marseille called Dimitri Payet said he was absolutely not going to the World Cup. He would not be on the plane. He wouldn't even be on the shortlist for it. But at the same time, you mix in things like Anthony Martial not playing many games, Thomas Lemar in a torrid form, and we don't know exactly where his head is at the moment. Kingsley Coman injured, Nabil Fekir possibly only just coming back from injury, so might not be quite fully fit, and had a couple of little setbacks recently as well. Combined with a man that's now in good form, really, it seems like a strange thing to say for the man. For 18 months, it's not quite gone Payet's way, but at the moment, especially in the Europa League games, he's taken the games by the scruff of the neck and shown his experience, and he's a seasoned campaigner with France. He obviously did well in the European Championships with them. So, Jez, has your opinion softened on him any more for possibly being a spot in that World Cup squad?
Yeah, it's kind of softened and hardened. It's hardened in that the form he's in now, sort of with hindsight, makes his form of the last 18 months absolutely disgraceful. I don't think it's just bad luck. I think a lot of the time he was making little or no effort for a lot of that time. And now that suddenly there's the incentive of the World Cup, he's suddenly playing to his best. I think is pretty sort of insulting of fans and teammates and everyone else over that last period. But yeah, the form he's in at the moment proves what a great player he can be on his day. And as you said, with the lack of form of certain other players, I do think Deschamps will be tempted to bring him in. I think Deschamps likes Lemar, so I think he may well still stick with him. But it really is a concern the way he's playing, and I wonder if whether or not Mendy makes the squad may have a bearing on Deschamps' picks, because Mendy and Lemar combined so brilliantly last season. But it is still going to be a young squad, and I in the form he's in at the moment, it's difficult to leave him out. Even if he doesn't start, it's hard to leave him out of the squad. I think my main concern with Payet still is, firstly, that you say he had a very good European Championships. He had a Benzema-style European Championships in that he looked absolutely fantastic for the first two matches of the group stage and then vanished a little bit. So it's again whether he can sort of keep it up consistently. But in terms of the last couple of months and in League and Europe, he certainly has done so. And the other one, which I think has always been a problem for him for France, and something that Deschamps always worried about, is his absolute complete lack of interest in helping whoever is playing left back, helping out in defence, and particularly seeing as fullbacks are the problem position for France. I think that is going to be an important factor, and something that Deschamps may bear in mind when it comes to picking his starting lineup. But yeah, in terms of current form, I think Payet probably has booked his ticket on the plane.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it, Rich? How things change so dramatically, quite quickly, and you can add even to that list the other players that you think of, like Dembele, who's really not hit the ground running at Barcelona this season, despite their successes, and you think that there's not many others that are vying for a place other than maybe someone like Mbappe and Tovan and Fekir, if he can prove his fitness in these last couple of games as well, but he's back in the equation, and there's an impact player, and with someone with experience, if he does turn it on, he's someone you want.
Yeah, I think in terms of the sort of playmakery kind of role, I think it's coming. Seems to be coming down to probably only one of three, and that's Lamar, Payet, and Fekir. I think each have their part. I mean, Lamar obviously has the advantage of being the man in the squad at the moment. He's the man that Deschamps has been picking recently. Payet has the advantage of being the form player of the three. He is most definitely the player in form and carries that experience as well. And then Fekir, I think, carries the fact that I think of the three, he's probably the most talented in that particular role. I think the way that he can interact with players, bring players in, I think he can offer certainly everything I think Payet can offer on the pitch and a little bit more. It's just obviously he is just coming back from a bit of a knock. So I think you can make cases for and against all three of those. Certainly at the moment, I think your strongest case is for Payet. I think being the player in form, plus having that experience in an attack where maybe France are going to be a little bit inexperienced. If you're going to think that Dembele's going, if you're going to think that Thauvin going, if you're going to think that Mbappe's going, maybe having someone like Payet in that more advanced role will help them out. But of course, yeah, you do run the risk of, he disappears in the certainly at Euro 2016, didn't perform anywhere near to the levels that we'd seen earlier in the tournament. Once we reach the knockout stages of that, but of course, at least he's got experience of that. Lamar and Fekir don't, so it's a very complicated one. It's a very tough decision, I think, that Deschamps is going to have to make here. I personally believe, I think Payet will get a call up here. I think what we've seen from Lamar over the last few weeks, it's not something that Deschamps is going to look at kindly. He's always been about the harmony of the squad, without a shadow of a doubt. And displaying that kind of attitude that Lamar has shown at club level, I don't think it's going to go down well with Deschamps.
So I think it might more be at Martial's expense. Is my fee? I don't know, but that's my.
It could be, but I do think. I would personally prefer to see Fekir. I think of the three, I think I would rather see Fekir just because I think he can offer a little bit more. But if you're telling me who I think Deschamps will pick, I think he's going down the Payet route.
I think I agree. I'd quite like Fekir to be in there, but I think his disadvantage is that he's still much more effective as a central player, and whereas the other two can play in the centre, they're much more accustomed to playing on the left. And I think that the systems and the personnel that Deschamps like, I think he's probably more interested in someone who can play on the left, sort of as a priority, and then also able to play in the centre. Whereas Fekir, I think, is more the other way around, and that might work to his disadvantage. But he's been so unlucky the last couple of years of injury. I certainly wouldn't begrudge him a place. But I agree that I think Payet's definitely favourite at the moment.
Absolutely incredible how fast these things can change, really. Just before we go tonight, I wanted to make a quick mention to, sadly, that on Tuesday, April 24th, former Nantes and France international Henri Michel unfortunately lost his life. Played loads and loads of games for Nantes in the 60s and 70s when they were really successful. 58 caps for the national side, even managed them, and had a successful spell with Monaco where he brought them to the World Cup in his home country as well, which was a terrific thing. And I'm sure many Scotsmen will remember, or kind of remember at least their last appearance in the tournament when they were beaten 3-0 by that Morocco side, although they might not take too kindly to them reminding me. But a great man, a famous partier as well by many. And there's a great piece on our website by our very own Philippe Bargiel on the great Henri Michel. But our thoughts to his family and friends at this sad time. That's all we have time for this week. My thanks to Rich, Jez, and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the preview show, which is going to be a cracker after Marseille's game on Thursday. And the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.